Research the other side, find out where they come from, what their background is. I'm not saying be inauthentic, and I'm definitely not saying stalk them.
What was the culture like at MGM, and what were some of the pros and cons in working there?
We exceeded I had one person save $22 million re-looking at IT licensing, needing less licenses, going from the platinum package, the 24/7, 365 support, down to 8 to 5, Monday through Friday level of support.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the RK Leadership Podcast, where we help empower tomorrow's leaders through sharing of knowledge, experience, and inspiring stories. I'm your host, Rob Cameronpour, and my special guest today is Mike Inman, and he's currently a B2B negotiation trainer at Tableforce, and he spent over 4.5 years at MGM Resorts. Before I pass it on to Mike to kind of give us a more background about himself, I wanted to take this time to say thank you very much, Mike, for being on the podcast today. And I look forward to some of your insights and wisdom with the audience today.
I can't guarantee wisdom, but I'll share my insights. I'm pretty good about being raw, and I've had some interesting experiences, or at least that's what people tell me. Maybe other people can learn from.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. So why don't we start off by me asking you, what is your story and how did you get into leadership?
Yeah, so I'll reluctantly say I was into leadership. I just kind of fell into my career. I started off as an engineer, and I couldn't find a job as an engineer, and I ended up in sales. My grandfather was a salesperson. He always had a nice new car, didn't work a lot of Fridays, played a lot of golf, that life of a salesperson. And I did that for about 3 years before I realized that I was average. And I didn't want to be average. So I worked with my peers. I did a survey and I worked with my boss on how I could get better. And what came out of the survey and some of his feedback was everybody on the sales team had been in purchasing before they went into sales. And I didn't understand why that was important. And he explained why understanding the other side sheet of paper is important. And he happened to know a hiring manager over at General Motors who was hiring buyers. And he said, if you'd like, I could get you a job as a buyer. And I said, well, how long would it take me to figure out the other side sheet of paper? Thinking I wanted to be a great salesperson. And he said, oh, a year or two tops, you'd figure it out. And so he got me a job in purchasing at General Motors so I could understand how to be a better salesperson. I understood the buy side then. And I did that for a little while. I beat suppliers up negotiating. I mean, I had big volume behind me. I had a big name behind me. I had a system behind me. And I was good at abusing salespeople. Because I understood the salesperson's sheet of paper. I understood how to feel the pressure, end of the month, end of the quarter, end of the year. If I could negotiate, I would have much more leverage with a salesperson. And I was abusive for about 6 months before I woke up one day and I said, you know what, I can't do this. I can't take advantage of people for a living. That doesn't feel good. It doesn't matter how many awards you win and accolades you get and pats on the back. I just couldn't do that. So I decided to study negotiating. And I read books on negotiating, took classes on negotiating, like the one I now teach. And I went from a buyer to a manager to a director in the GM system very quickly. I was in the high pot program, but moved along, finding my own opportunities. I see a lot of people who I got passed over. Darn it, I deserve that. Well, go find your opportunity. I moved 8 times corporately in my career, chasing the title, chasing the responsibility. So that's why I'm reluctant to call myself a leader, because I never really thought I want to lead people. For me, it was more of I'm looking for the next big opportunity to learn, to grow, to do more. And as a function of that, I ended up at IAC Interactive Corp, one of their divisions. I had senior vice president title with 130 people reporting to me at 35 years old. So progressed fairly quickly in that. And then from there, I moved over to MGM Resorts for the 4.5 years. And when people say, what's your proudest accomplishment? I tell them my proudest accomplishment was for 4.5 years, I had 0 turnover. Wow. No one left my team. I learned how to protect my team through layoffs. I survived 15 layoffs corporately. I was at America West before it was American Airlines. We had 6 layoffs in 9 months after 9/11. It was a bloodbath. I learned how to protect my teammates and not have to let them go because the CFO said whack 10%. And so I was able to keep people interested in being on my team and protect them from being laid off. So that was my big claim to fame. There, I did a lot of other things. The team did a lot of other things, but that's the one accomplishment that I look back fondest on.
But Mike, that is absolutely an amazing accomplishment. And today a lot of companies are having issues with retaining their employees. So how did you go about, protecting your team and ensuring that people don't get laid off?
Yeah. So for years in my management career, when times were tough, when the company was almost bankrupt, when we were going to miss payroll or that was projected out, the CEO, CFO would get together and they'd figure out we need to cut 8%, 10%, some number, and they would say to all the heads of departments, figure out who you're going to let go. And I did. I was a good soldier. I figured out what's the best way to produce the most value in those layoffs. And at MGM, our teams were producing. Everybody on my team had a 10x return on investment on their salary.
Wow.
So when we were almost bankrupt and they came and they said, whack 10%, I said, that's foolish. I mean, that's taking a sledgehammer or an axe. I understand we need a scalpel. We need to do some things less. When there's less people in your hotel, you need less guest room attendants. When there's less people in your casino, you need less dealers. But you don't just say, everybody lose 10%. So I went to my boss. And he said, who are you going to let go? And I said, nobody. And he said, excuse you? And I said, yeah, I wanted to look at this differently. You give me a cost savings goal, and you let me protect my people for 1 year. And if I don't hit it, you can fire me. And he looked at me and he said, Corey Sanders was in charge of the layoff at the time. He said, Corey will do it, don't you? He'll whack you. And I said, I know. But that's the risk I'm willing to take because my people are really good and I've seen the history with them. You just give me a savings goal and I'll go hit it. And if I don't, I'm out. And we did it. We exceeded I had one person save $22 million re-looking at IT licensing, needing less licenses, going from the platinum package, the 24/7, 365 support down to 8 to 5 Monday through Friday level of support. There's operating decisions that a company can make greatly reduce their costs without really greatly impacting people's lives or the product. So, when you have a person who makes $100,000 a year, save 22 million, that protects a whole lot of people in the organization. So we did that. And then we had another layoff and I said, just give me my number and I'm not whacking anybody. And we did it again. So that made me happy that I learned how to not be a good soldier and say, okay, I'll go whack people, and say, no, I'm not whacking anybody. I'm going to push back politely, professionally, of course, but to say, let me produce more value than just taking the headcount out.
That's right. And that's amazing, Mike. And, I pose a question on my content on my social media, and there's a lot of times where leaders are so scared to push back against, their bosses because the first thing the fear that comes in their head is, oh, I'm going to lose my job. But your job is to protect your people, right?
Well, it's part of your job. I mean,
yes.
Ultimately, your job is to produce value for the shareholders. Like
Correct.
if we want to do corporate speak,
correct.
There's people who've invested in the company and they expect a return that could be short-term, long-term, could be financial, could be goodwill, could be lots of things. But that is the end goal. And then there's how you accomplish that is leadership decisions.
Absolutely. So, Mike, I'm sure a lot of people wanna know this. What was the culture like at MGM, and what were some of the pros and cons in working there?
Yeah, my fond memories. So we own the Bellagio, the finest of 5-star resorts, the best of everything, and we own Circus. Family oriented, a little lower budget. Did have a great steakhouse. I think they still do have a great steakhouse there. Excalibur and Circus at that end of the market would steal each other's towels and linens from the there was a little bit of that kind of competition going on. It was described to me by a person I greatly respect and actually just spoke to earlier today as even though it's clean, it's a clean operation, everyone's got gaming licenses, the old school is gone, but it's a family.
Yeah.
So if you are a captain of a squad and you are protected in a family mentality, and again, this is the legal side, but the culturally, if you are on the CEO's team, if you came from the property where the CEO came from, and you know each other, you've worked for each other, you are protected and you could have a little more discretion in trying things. And if you didn't have a very senior leader as your protector, you were always at risk. I didn't know that at first. You talk about being scared. I scared my boss greatly in one of the first meetings I was in. we were trying to bring all the properties together, 10 strip properties, formerly 3 companies owning the 10 strip. So culturally very different. Back at the House of Bellagio, you sit and wait. There's Picassos on the wall in the waiting room. And I don't think they're fake. Now they're small Picassos, but you're sitting on a couch and you're just right next to it, like a museum piece. And in other places, back of the house, we invest in the front of the house, we invest in the guests, but back of the house is not painted and wires are hanging out and stuff like that. So very different cultures coming together. And we corporately were tasked with getting all these properties to come together on common contracts. So an example like brooms, just why do we have 10 different broom contracts? Let's have one corporate contract and with all that volume and get the best brooms for the lowest price and go. So there was a report that came out that one of the properties was beating the corporate deal. They had found better pricing than corporate did. So we got called to task. So we're in this meeting and we're getting yelled at that we're not doing our job because here's this little property and they're running around and they got better deals than you. You guys don't know how to negotiate. You don't know anything. How is that possible? And I said, let me tell you how it's possible. They took the corporate contract. They went to the supplier that lost and they said, beat this number and I'll give you the business. And the supplier, having lost all the business, went, okay, here's whatever number you want. And that's how they beat it. But I did it in a very assertive way to a C-level person. My boss at the time was a CPO, and she was looking at me like, you're going to get us both fired. Like, shut up. And Corey happened to be in charge of this project also. And first meeting with him ever. And again, he's got a reputation for being tough. And he paused, and he looked at me, and he said, you're right. We lack discipline. The properties are going around you, and that's what's happening. And the little voice in my head said, yeah, I know I'm right. But really what was going on is I went, whew, thank goodness I was able to convince him that I was right before he didn't like my attitude and said, on with you.
That's right.
But I had another boss at MGM start off by telling everybody, your job is to do what I say. And I walked out of that meeting and there was another guy that I worked with, Brian Hanlon's his name. And we're walking down the hall and I said, Brian, he's going to make a mistake. I'm going to tell him. Now, I may not call him out publicly, but I'm going to pull him aside. I'm going to say, no, this is not the right thing to do. And here's why. I am protecting you. I am trying to make you look good, but I'm not just going to do what you say.
Yeah.
Now, going back to your comment about, people kind of being afraid of their boss or of situations or taking risk. There's a lot of people out there like that, and I can't blame them. I'm weird. I'm a unicorn. I take risks. I do weird stuff. This is a Sunday. You and I are talking because I love what I do and I love helping people. And other people are like, no, why would you go the extra mile? Why would you work outside your work hours? They're probably right. I spent a lot of time I should have been spending with my family and other things. But I took risks, calculated risks, risk with approval of myself and my wife to make sure that it was right for us. And I ended up on a path that's a long, winding road. I do. You asked me about MGM culture. I think I stayed too long. I was the guy who served the Kool-Aid. This is great. We own the Bellagio, and it's the best in the world. And one day the Kool-Aid stopped tasting so good, but I served it to all the team. And then one day I woke up feeling naive, And then one day I woke up feeling stupid. And that's the day I started looking for work. And I negotiated for 6 months with guys who taught me to negotiate, to teach negotiations. And my biggest mistake was I didn't leave earlier. Now, they have told me you wouldn't be as good at what you do if you didn't stay that long, if you didn't have the experiences and the stories to build off of. So maybe that's true. You never
Right.
know what you don't know in hindsight.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. And you know, you do what you do, Mike, because when you're passionate about something and you care about something, it doesn't become work anymore, right? It doesn't feel like work, right? And that's why you're
Yeah.
doing what you're doing.
There are
So
very few days that I feel like work. Out of 365, I might get one client that's kind of a pain, or that takes us to a non-exotic location. I get to go to Singapore, and I get to go to London, and I won't name the cities that sometimes I have to go to. But sometimes they're cold. It's in the middle of winter. Sometimes there's nothing else to do but train. So I jump on a little turboprop and end up near the Arctic Circle.
oh
That's
wow.
happened. It was a great experience, but I don't want to go back in February again.
Then I guess you've been to Toronto as well, eh, Mike?
I have been to Toronto many times. Yeah, more for pleasure than for fun. I grew up in Detroit, so we go up there for
Oh,
baseball
nice.
games and stuff like that. Yeah, it was a good time.
Awesome. Mike, you talked about chasing the next title.
Yeah.
What is your advice to people who are constantly chasing titles?
Uh, my advice: constantly chasing titles. Be careful when you catch the car. The dog that chases the car and catches it. There are some sayings out there: "Fake it till you make it," which I disagree with the phrase. I
Okay.
think if you fake it, you're going to get exposed. So be sure you're ready for that next level of opportunity. Talk to people who've been there. What's that job really like? I think there's a lot of jobs that are advertised as great jobs and great opportunities, and you get in there and you find out they're not so fun and they're really hard to do.
That's right.
Right? Because when I see the recruiting process, which by the way is very one-sided, and job seekers right now they're complaining so publicly. I've applied for 1,000 jobs. I see one person a week say they apply for more than 1,000 jobs, and I'm going, oh my God, how horrible. Apply. How much rejection they're getting. How much can their ego take? Like, I couldn't take that much. When I applied for jobs, I was very strategic. I found a job that I had 90% of the qualifications for. No one's ever going to be 100%. And by the way, job seekers of the world, that's their ask. That's their opening position. We'd like for someone to have all these qualifications. It's really not a minimum.
That's right.
It's they're just looking for that unicorn. So go ahead and apply. But I'd also see people applying for jobs they had no business, no background in. Now, I'm not saying they couldn't do the job well, but when you have 300 people who have a background in that area, and you're the 301st person and you don't have background in that area, even though you might be really smart and dedicated and a great teammate and be able to do that job, you go to
Yeah.
the back of the list behind the other 300 who have to fail at something before the hiring manager says, I'm going to take a risk on this person. I took a risk on a person that didn't have a college degree, didn't have experience on the buy side, but
Hmm.
they were an IT person, and I was looking for an IT sourcing manager, and I knew their husband. And they said, my wife's looking for work. If you're ever looking for somebody, she's really good. She's really dedicated. Now, yes, we always want to talk our spouse up and our kids' spouse, but he
Yeah.
convinced me that, and he would have to work. So if she didn't work out, it would be a negative reflection of him. And I appreciated his ethics. And when an opening came up, I called her and I hired her, and she did phenomenal work. But that's not the norm. The norm is you get a stack of 300 resumes, and well, sorry, the HR system screens out, and they say these are the ones who made the grade, or the top ones you should look at. And by the way, that happens in the first 3 days. If you're 2 weeks away from the hiring date, you're so far behind. Unless you know the hiring manager somehow, you're never going to get your resume in the stack of people to call. It's just a numbers game. So you better be on the ball. A job gets posted, you apply for the job immediately. You get a stack. Hiring manager gets a stack of resumes. They go through them very quickly, and they're going to pull out the 10 that feel like it's the closest to what I'm looking for. Low
That's right.
risk, potential on-target hire. And then of the 10, 3 are going to get a call. By the way, I remember, as this is a leadership podcast, I remember reading in my first job where I was managing people about bias. And it explains specifically the name bias.
Yes.
Before you even see the person, meet the person, know anything about the person, getting the resume, and you look at the name at the top and how that impacted the hiring. And I said, wow, you know what I'm going to do? So when I get a stack of resumes, this isn't a stack of resumes, this is a stack of my feedback. I would take a piece of, I go low tech whenever possible. I love technology, but when you can do it low tech without tech, I go low tech. I put the piece of paper over the top so I wouldn't see the name. Then I would read the resume to make sure that I was reducing, and I won't say eliminate because nobody can eliminate complete bias completely, but I was reducing my own bias. I will stop and ask people in a class that I do, will you please pronounce your name for me? Because there are some people who have unique spellings. There was a guy, it was a different spelling of Michael, and I didn't know if he had an Eastern Bloc, if it was Mikkel or some other pronunciation. And I said, will you pronounce your name for me? And he said, Michael, like yours, like duh, like you're an idiot. But I wanted to be respectful that maybe because there was a different spelling, it might be a different pronunciation. I only speak US English. So my pronunciation is going to be off for a lot of people that I teach around the world, but I'm going to make the attempt at that. But then there's some names that even after they pronounce it for me, I'm like, oh boy, I'm going to botch this one. I just know it. And there are people who won't hire a person because they don't want the embarrassment of, how do you pronounce their name again? Hey, you. And that's unfair. Yeah. And it's not even the person's fault. It's their parents who named them in most cases. And it's not the parents' fault a lot of times because they come from a different culture or they immigrated. My wife's an immigrant. So remove the bias to get to the better person. I'll figure out how to pronounce your name. If you're good at what you do, I want you on my team enough where I will figure out how to pronounce your name. Right?
That's right, Mike. So, you and I talked about this. I think my opinion is the bias still exists in today's society. And I'm not sure what your opinion is on this. I think some organizations and some hiring managers still have either a conscious or unconscious bias. So you talk about covering a name on a resume and looking at it. Mm-hmm. Now, what do you do when they actually come in and you still have, or when I say you, I don't mean you.
Yeah.
But you still have an unconscious bias towards, say, a race, a gender, or whatever it is. How do we deal with that, Mike?
That's a great question. I'm an engineer, and before I was an engineer, I was a math nerd. I like data. I like objective. Mm-hmm. I love a good story. Don't hear something I'm not saying. I love to feel a certain good feeling.
Yeah.
But when it's about business, my cognitive bias as an engineer data person kicks into higher gear. I just got into a very fierce online debate with somebody who says all decisions are irrational and emotional. I agree with that statement based on the science. However, if a person's on a bridge, their brain is in a highly irrational state. They got fired, they lost their spouse, some tragedy happened, and they're going to take a step that nobody ever wants to be in that spot.
Yeah. Then
there's a person who buys the red Porsche. Now, great car. But if your job is to get from point A to point B in a fuel efficient, economic efficient way, you're not going to buy a red Porsche. Insurance is higher. Everything's higher on a red Porsche.
Yeah.
But you want it. Now, you can hold off on that decision. The person on the bridge is going to make a quick decision. The person buying the red Porsche is going to have not this month. I can't afford it now. So their logic is creeping in to an emotional decision. Then there's a decision that I just made the other day. My wife said we need to get shelf paper for our shelves because they're getting a little dirty and speckly from the water. So now I went to Amazon. An emotional connection. I have good experiences, but within Amazon, I decided which one I was going to get. I sorted by size, I sorted by absorbency, and then I sorted by rating, and then I looked at the top 3 and I read information about them. my wife said we're getting shelf paper. So emotionally, we're getting shelf paper. But my engineering objectivity really creeped in. And then there's business negotiations, of which there are really kind of two. There's the, we like this marketing agency, that old, no one ever got fired for hiring IBM. So there's an emotional connection to a version of risk that happens, but there's generally two IBMs. You know, there's two major players in a space, Salesforce and HubSpot. You know, you're emotionally tied to low risk big names, but hopefully you will look at what are their processes, what's the total cost of doing business with them, and then there's the business side where, like at General Motors, I got 7 blow molders doing blow molded injections. And part of my strategy is to keep the business with enough of them. I want them all in business so that they are giving me good products and services. I don't want 1 or 2 because then they might jack the price up. But there's a number you want to have to reduce supply chain risk. And you're going to look at their quality metrics. Who just opened a new plant and we don't have enough data on them? Who's closer so our logistics costs are lower? These are a team of people with financial backgrounds are looking at supply chain decisions in a very objective way. They still have favorites, but the emotion goes down and the objectivity goes up in that type of decision. So I think, similar to bias, we all have some of these biases that creep in. The question is, are you aware of them? What's that called? Where you are unconsciously incompetent, where you don't even know that you're incompetent. And then creeps in that you are consciously incompetent. You start to know, I don't know stuff. And then there's that Dunning-Kruger thing where you start to get a little bit of knowledge and you start to feel really good and confident, but you're really not. But ultimately, you want to be competent and confident that you actually know what's going on. And that's the lifelong learner goal I think a lot of people have. I have that. I know I don't know everything. I make mistakes all the time. I posted a joke and my boss said, we were in Italy with my wife, and I love churches. I love to go to see all these old churches. And I said, hey, everybody, we've been in Italy for 10 days. I've seen 15 chapels. And today we get to see the 16th chapel. And my boss called me. He goes, you know, it's not the 16th chapel, right? And I said, yeah, no, it's a joke. And he goes, yeah, but a lot of people may not think you're joking. I don't know. If they don't, you know, that's on them. I like to have fun, but I take risks that other people may not take because they don't want to look foolish. Whereas I don't mind being a little bit foolish because then either I learn or somebody else learns. That's okay.
And you're also being authentic, Mike. And I think that's great because, you know, you got to be yourself no matter what. You're never going to appease the masses, as they say. So it's great just being yourself and right.
That reminds me of our first interaction online, and you posted something about title, and I commented that I had I commented one story about taking title off my card, and I said, and I have another story that's a mistake. Can I tell you the mistake story?
Yeah,
I think it fits with what you just said. Okay,
I have that for you.
Do you want to go in order, or do you want to jump to that question?
There's no order. Go ahead, man.
So this is when I had my big job, 130 people. I had operations, I had facilities under me. I was growing outside of procurement, doing a lot of other things. And I was asked to redo the floor plan for a corporate move. And I was looking at the floor plan, and from the old building to the new building, there weren't enough offices for all the people who had a VP title and who previously had an office. So the CEO wanted this plan from me to figure it out, Mike. Where are we going to put all these people? What are we going to do? So I went through and I tried to spend money, which I don't like to do unnecessarily, but to resize the offices and just do lots of creative things. Let hybrids share an office, and nothing worked out. So I went to the CEO and I said, I don't have a solution for you other than why don't we give the offices to all the real VPs? And he said, what do you mean the real VPs? And I said, well, let's be honest. There's a lot of salespeople we have who have 0 people reporting to them, but because of the strategic nature, they're a VP of the region, the space, the vertical, because when they talk to customers, the customers want to talk to a VP, but they don't have people on their team that they have to close the door and have a private conversation.
Yes.
So he goes, yeah, but why did you call them real VPs versus non-VPs? And I said, well, I thought I just explained. There are some people who have a title, but it's because of the job, not because of of their situation.
Yes.
And I think we should give it to the people who have closed door meetings with their direct reports. Well, it turns out that the CEO was former head of sales. I did not know that. And he's the one who decided that they were better with more titles, more VP titles out there, because, as a good salesperson knows, customer wants to talk to a VP.
Yes.
So the fact that I had devalued his strategy of calling them VPs was personally not very tasteful to him. So we didn't get along very well for a little while after that. So you do have to be careful. That's a mistake that I made. I tell people, research the other side, find out where they come from, what their background is. I'm not saying be inauthentic, and I'm definitely not saying stalk them, but figure out some information about them before you communicate, before you have meetings, before you say the wrong thing like I did.
That's right. And that's very important too, Mike. Getting to know, your own people, and not only that work with you, but also, people across and above you. So it's
Oh,
kind of managing everywhere.
your own people too. So leadership mistake I made. I was working. I always thought lead by example. To the point of, at MGM, we had privileges where we could go and eat at certain restaurants in front of the house, and the regular employees could only eat at the buffets in the back of the house. And I found myself eating back of the house with my team and other people 4 out of 5 days a week. Yes, I did dine at some nicer places. Sometimes I took suppliers there, but I felt like I needed to lead by example. Hey, we're all eating. We're all in this together. We're all at the buffet, at the same time, kind of a thing. So leading by example has always been important. So I was trying to motivate a new team that I had taken over. And I was coming in early and I was staying late and I was an individual contributor on projects. And I was doing all the checkbox things that you're supposed to do, all the stuff you read about on LinkedIn. And I wasn't getting the team to follow. And it was really frustrating. So I called up a mentor of mine and I laid out the situation. And he said, "Are you ready for it?" And I said, "Yeah, give me some advice." And he said, "How dare you?" And I said, "Excuse me?" And he said, "How dare you assume that all these people want a career like you do, like you have?" He said, "Mike, some people just want a job. They want benefits. They want to get out of the house. They want to feel productive. They
Yes.
don't want to come in early and stay late and do extra stuff. They don't want to take risks. They don't want to be the person that says, I'm making the decision, and if this goes sideways, they have to own it. You want that. How dare you project on them your wants and needs?" And I said, "Wow, you're right. I've been doing that." So after a little more coaching, he framed it up like a hockey team. He said, on a hockey team, there are centers and there are wing. And one of those two is going to be the leading goal scorer on the team, and the other is going to lead in assists on the team. Then there's goalies who stop bad things from happening. And then there's guys who go in the corner and dig and get into fights. And then, by the way, there's a guy on the bench whose whole job is to get into fights. And then there's guys who stand in front of the net and get 100-mile-an-hour slap shots fired their way, and their job is to knock them down. And they're going to get hit with the puck a lot. It's not a fun job, but they get paid well to do it, and they like to do it.
That's right.
So he said, you got to figure out what everybody on the team wants to do, what role on the team they want to play. And then you, as the lead of the team, have to figure out how to get them those jobs. So we did that. We had a meeting. Okay, come together, everybody. I'm going to bare my soul. This is what happened to me. This is how I got here. I want us to be like a hockey team, but I don't want to project on you what you want. So if you want a job where you come at 8 and you leave at 5 and you don't have to worry on weekends and nights, I got some purchase orders that need placing. I got some phone calls. I got some supplier qualifications. I got some very tactical level procurement stuff that needs done, and I'll get you more of that work. And if you want a promotion, if you want a raise, if you want a career, if you want visibility, I got some projects that you're going to own, and you're going to go in front of internal customers and say, this is my recommendation. I am going to challenge you, the person. I'm going to challenge internal customers. You're making the wrong decision, and here's why. If you want that career, then I got some projects for you to work on. But you have to tell me what you want out of this working relationship so that I can help you to help yourself. And that was a highly functioning team. But that came from my mistake of assuming that everybody wanted the same thing that I did.
Yeah. And that's why I always recommend the book, The Four Agreements to people. And one of the agreements is never assume, right?
Well, so I challenge that, Rob. No, but but I'll put the qualifier on it.
Yeah.
Don't assume it makes an ASS out of you and me. I think we should assume, but we should challenge that assumption ourselves. We should ask questions about it to say to somebody, hey, listen, I'm assuming that you want a promotion. And if they go, in fact, I've had two people in my career say, I don't want a promotion. I just want to work. One at MGM. Our boss gave up this passionate speech on how, to get that raise, to get that promotion. And this guy in his uncle was one of the Beach Boys. And I think he had some family money off the side, and he raised his hand and he said, well, what if I don't want a raise and a promotion? And everybody looked at him like, that's the dumbest thing to say out loud. But God bless him. He said it. He just said, I just want a job. I just want to come to work. I want benefits. And I want to say that I work at MGM. Great. There you go. There's your job.
Yeah. Mike, there's assuming, and there's assuming with validation. So if you assume something, go and validate it and get the facts.
Okay, now we're 100% on the same page.
Yeah.
We should assume, but go test your assumption.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's why, like, for me, having one-on-one meetings with your staff is critical. And don't wait until the end of the year to do this ticky box because, oh yeah, I sat down and I did this, general questions. Get to really know them.
If you don't know what's coming out of your review at the end of the year, you've got a bad situation.
Yes.
You should know when your boss is mad at you that day. That's that week, right? And you should know when your boss is happy with you. Now, it's a two-way street. Your boss has to be open and transparent and tell you, and you have to be looking for the clues because sometimes bosses are just busy. They don't have time to say, hey, Rob, that was great. Thank you. It can be, good job, Rob, and on to the next thing because the boss has 300 emails to get through.
That's right. It's like recognition. Recognition has to be timely and specific. You don't wait until the end of the year to recognize somebody. Oh, by the way, you did a great job 5 months ago on something, right?
Yeah. But say the one-on-ones, I had a situation where a negotiated agreement. They joined our team. They said, but here's my problem. I have to take care of my son on the weekends. So arriving at work Monday at 8 and leaving Friday at 5 are deal killers. I can't take the job. And I said, okay, I'll make a deal with you. You can show up at noon on Monday and you can leave at noon on Friday. But when I have a crazy idea I want to run by somebody, when I have a special project that needs after hours attention, you're going to be on the hook to make up for the time that you're not here. And they said, yeah, no problem. As soon as my kid goes to bed, I'm just watching TV. I'll do it. So about 3 years into that relationship, one of my other star performers, they both ended up as manager of the one manager of the year. One was a runner up for manager of the year. So they were both star performers on the team. The other one comes to me and says, by the way, I'm not going to use their name because I'm close with them still 14 years later.
Nice.
They said, you like him more than me. And I said, what? They said, well, you spend all this time with him. And I said, yeah, you are here at 7 a.m. You don't leave sometimes till 7 or 8 o'clock at night. So I don't bother you after hours. You're working so hard and you're producing such great results. I'm not going to bother you on a weekend with one of my crazy, stupid ideas. He's on the hook for it because of the agreement we had. And they were like, yeah, but it just feels like you're friends with them and not me because you don't pay any attention with me. And I said, the reason I don't pay attention to you is you're delivering massive results. Like, I'm going to stay out of your way. I don't want to screw up the results you're producing. But see, their need was more time with me.
Yeah.
So then I made the effort to stop by more. When I'm going to get coffee, go by their office instead of the fastest way to the coffee, take an extra 30 seconds to go a little out of my way to say, hey, how you doing today? But that's a growth thing for me to learn.
Yep. And you have to understand what people on your team really want, right? And
well, you see all the time on LinkedIn, don't be a micromanager, don't be a micromanager. So I tried to not be a micromanager. Yeah. And it turns out they were saying, yeah, but you've gone the other extreme. You just don't pay any attention.
Yeah. there's still people that need the validation, Mike.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So I came across your LinkedIn and I saw this and I gotta ask you about it. So you stated, I like people who begin by blurting out something overly personal. Okay. So with that, I was going to ask you, what's the one personal thing you would like to share with people that would be helpful in their journey?
In their journey. Rob, I don't want to encourage anybody to make a mistake just because they're following some advice that I said. I see a lot of advice on the internet and I'm like, this is wrong. And then you look at the person's bio and they have no legitimacy. They've never done what they're giving advice on in their life, but it sounded really good.
That's
So I got
right.
to be careful. I don't want people to just say, well, Mike said to do it, so I'm going to do it. I would say be an authentic you. Find the way for you to add value to the company in a maximum way while you're being the most true self that you can be. I do think people like authentic people. I don't think I'm the only one in that case. Now, don't be weird just to be weird, because that's not authentic either. There's people who do fake stuff all the time. But look, I'm a boring guy. I went to Costco today, and I'm wearing a Costco shirt, and jeans are Costco, shoes are Costco. I'm just boring Costco guy when it comes to what I wear. And then there's stuff that I do when I post on LinkedIn that gets out there a little bit, and I poke bears. When I see something that I disagree with in a respectful way,
Yeah.
I will, and I question it. I don't say you're wrong. I will say something like, how did you come to that conclusion? And I've found a lot of people don't like to be questioned. I've made a lot of internet enemies. I got blocked by somebody in my space I gave him a compliment, and the compliment wasn't in the narrative, shall we say. I was complimenting what I saw in their bio as real success, but they weren't really faking it, but they were getting into the gray area of faking it. And I gave them a compliment on their real success when they were really trying to play up their newfound marketing narrative. And yeah, they blocked me. And it just so happens I was having fun. I was poking bears on Facebook. I said, hey, everybody, guess who I got to block me? And one of their friends that I know was like, oh my God, I know them. And then I'm unblocked now. But it got back to them that I didn't take it as a slight. I actually wore it as a badge of honor. Not everybody can poke bears. And that's okay.
And again, that goes being your authentic self, Mike. And there are people that have the egos and they don't like to get their egos broken at times, and the insecurities. But I think it's fantastic when you can. And I always tell this is part of my expectations that I give to my teams every year. I want you guys to challenge me.
Oh God, yeah.
But do it
Life is so
professionally.
boring.
Yeah, like,
hey Rob, I'm a poor
challenge
speller and grammar. I'm really bad at it. And even with spell check, I will pick the wrong word.
me.
So in some of these internet battles, probably twice a year, someone will say the spell there wrong, trying to like poke me.
Yeah.
And I respond the same way. Thank you. I am a horrible speller, and I appreciate when you call out my mistakes, because now I'm better for it. I'll pay a little more attention. I'll never be a great speller. I've convinced myself that, but I will pay a little more attention a little more often. So thank you for pointing out that I made a mistake.
And
Right.
it's good when you get people to challenge you again professionally. There's other perspectives that you can see, and sometimes you get that aha moment. I was thinking this all along, but maybe there's another way to do it, and aha, like there it is, right?
Well, the very first post, the original story on removing title from the card.
Yes.
So this person got through the funnel, got through the process, got to me at MGM, and they were, oh God, they play tennis with Alexander Haig at the club in Palm Beach, and Al Haig says that they should call me and get a hold of me, and it was this crazy scheme. It was they would get with a roofing company who had extra roofing tiles, and instead of scrapping those, they would get like dollary dues, like some credit. And then a company that needed that did marketing, if they had some extra time, they hired somebody and they weren't full yet, they could put these marketing hours in and get some dollary dues. And this company in the middle would allow the marketing company that needed a new roof to exchange their dollary dues, and the roofing company could use some marketing, and they were trying to develop their own ecosystem, and MGM had a lot of scrap stuff, carpet remnants and all sorts of stuff, but it was going to be really hard to do well, and I didn't think the value was really there. So I was putting the guy off, and the guy was calling me daily and getting really hot. And I said to our department admin, I said, this guy's a real piece of work. And then she told me a story about how she used the word abused her to get through to me in the first place. And I said, nobody's going to abuse you. That's it. I'm done. And she said, or I said something about, well, you don't deserve to be treated differently than me. Because he was being nice, he was a pest, but a polite pest. And apparently he had been fairly abusive with her. And she said, Mike, why do you think people are nice to you? And I said, I don't know. It's just because I'm worthy of being nice to. And she said, Mike, they're nice to you because of your title. Now here's a teammate telling the boss that, right? So I love that she could tell me that. Yes. And the little voice in my head said, what if she's right? How do we test that? Engineer, data. So I had business cards made up, took the title off my card, and started handing those out in meetings. And it's amazing not having a title to be able to say, here's what I think, and everyone say, oh, yes, 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 yes. To say, here's what I think, here's why I think it, and have people go, let's think about that. Let's consider that, in a way they don't do when you're the boss. Yes. Or when you're the client, when you're a title at the client, and all the salespeople say, yes, yes, yes. Now all of a sudden there was pushback. My ideas had to be better. My communication about my ideas had to be better, because I didn't have title as a crutch. I went to a convention, meeting all these salespeople at a convention, passing out cards. One of our directors of diversity came back and she said, Mike, I just heard the funniest thing. You're going to get such a kick out of this. One of the vendors that you just met said, hey, that intern Mike, you should hire him because he's really good. He thought that you were an intern. And my first thought was, oh my gosh, I'm young enough to be an intern. That's great. But then I thought, well, yeah, I did have a very interesting discussion with them. And they thought highly enough of me, of my ideas, to tell them that they should hire me because I didn't have a title. So clearly I was an intern. That's weird to not have a title on your business card. Again, I do weird stuff, but I learned from it. I learned you have a title sometimes as a crutch, and how to have better ideas, better scripted ideas. I was better off for not having the title.
Yeah. And that's a great experiment. And, I would love to see other people actually do this, because there's a lot of judgment and biases out there that really hinder the real decisions that need to be made based on what reality is versus what you're assuming.
Oh yeah. Well, just like I said, we didn't have to fire anybody. I pushed back on a C-level person. Not going to do it. Right? Do you know who you're saying no to? Yeah, I do. But let me explain why I'm saying no, and let me explain why they'll like it better. They haven't thought of this, and I'm gonna tell them my opinion. But take that to an extreme. If nobody had titles on any cards, in that world, I would argue that maybe our ideas are better. But can we? If everybody is a unicorn, if everybody's different, then nobody's different. I don't know. I'd love to game theory out what the world would look like if we didn't have title. We just said, you work for ABC company and your job is, do you even get to say marketing? Do you get to say HR? Do you get to say sales? At some point you have to have an accountability factor.
Yes. I think that, the structure needs to be there, and some sort of hierarchy in terms of, who's accountable for the final decision. But again, it is an interesting, experiment, because I feel like people will give you the time of the day if you've got a certain title to meet them, if you email them. But if you don't have that title, they won't even respond back to you.
Banking industry, notorious for it. Title inflation. Everybody who, at one point, I don't know if it's still the case, at one point, everybody who was a customer facing employee at a bank was you were either a teller or a VP. If you were selling loans, you were a VP.
Yeah,
You're a salesperson selling loans. You're the loan specialist, but you're a VP
that's
if
right.
you're at the branch in that role.
Yeah.
Is that a real VP? Yeah.
Yeah. And like you said, Mike, I don't really get the people that have those kind of titles, but they're not leading people, right? If you're just leading a portfolio, being a VP of something, again, to me, it's that it's like and I always say you don't need a title to lead, and a title doesn't make you a leader. But I think in an organizational structure, when you think about people with those
Oh,
titles, they have big teams under them, right?
right. There were some people who were less than enthusiastic about me removing my title that were at my level or above. I had I had challenged the system and devalued the title, if you will, by saying I don't need a title to be successful.
Yes.
They worked really hard to get their titles. I remember one time I got I got a little bit of a raise, a little bump. I got my own personal parking place, and at the time I was one of the first people in the office. I was there 7 o'clock in the morning, so I had upfront parking just by nature of being there early. So I went back to my team and I said, "Hey, everybody, guess what? We just got something. We got an employee of the month parking place.
Mm.
We're going to figure out how to award it, but that's going to be the award. The employee of the month gets the parking place. Now let's figure out some metrics in place. How are we going to vote on it? Or, what's the accomplishment that gets the employee of the month?" Later that afternoon, I get a call from one of the VPs. "Hey, I heard you got a parking place." "I did." "Yeah, I heard you gave it up." "Well, I didn't really give it up. I'm just giving it to the team." He goes, "I worked 8 years to get a parking place. And now my team wants to know how come they don't have an employee of the month award." And I'm like, "Hey, dude, you manage your team. I'm gonna manage my team. If you want to give it up, great. If you don't want to give it up, great. Figure out a different way to accomplish it. But this is my team. I'm gonna run it the way I think is right. As long as I'm above the ethical line, um, go do what you need to do."
That's right.
Didn't always make me friends by being different. And so that's what I want to, I want to caution people when I give advice. What works for me may not work for you. And there's risks associated with following my advice. I don't ever want to, I want to encourage people to try,
Yes.
but I don't want to encourage people to take on unnecessary risk. I don't want someone else to be fired. That's my heart would just break if somebody said, "I followed your advice and didn't work out." I would take it personally.
Yeah, you still got to be comfortable with yourself and what you're comfortable with. Like you said, your own risk tolerance. Not everyone's going to be Mike, right?
Yeah.
There's only one Mike.
Let's
You
hope.
can, yeah, well, you can tell people certain things. You can give your opinion, advice, but they can learn from it. They don't have to go and copy Mike,
Yeah,
right?
take from it. If anything,
Yes.
that's one thing I also did fairly successfully in my career is to take from other people things that
Hmm.
I thought worked and
Yes.
put it together. It's like those pictures with the dots in the
Right.
matrix. There can be some really weird looking pictures with dots, but if you can be a master artist and put those dots in the right places at the right time, you can paint a wonderful mosaic.
Yes.
But you have to be able to analyze what other people are doing and then assimilate it and figure out when you're going to do it and how you're going to do it authentically. You can't just copy somebody,
That's
as
right.
we've talked about.
That's right.
um and I do think there are some people who don't even know what they're doing. They don't strategically do it. They don't put thought into it. It's just a natural thing, or it's just a random event, and you can look at it and go, "Wow, I see what you did there. That was amazing. Great idea." And they go, "Huh?" It was just a randomness that crept in somewhere. So I think we got to be careful about you know over prioritizing things we see. Just just pay attention to what's going on
Yes,
and then figure out a way to use it.
that's right. Awesome. Well, thanks, Mike. We're almost at the end of the show. Before we
Yeah.
end the show, uh, we've reached my segment of rapid fire questions. So I'm going to
Ooh,
ask you a series of questions,
okay.
and you tell me the first thing that comes to mind. So what is the best advice that you ever received?
Best advice I ever received. At the moment, front of mind, when I got my first job managing people, and I was getting promoted because I was really good at working projects. I said to my boss, I'd like to keep projects. I like to work on projects, and I think I'm good at it, and it's good to show that I am a leader by example. And he said, no, I'm not going to let you do that. And I said, why not? And he said, I want you to teach all 10 people how to do what you do. And if you're doing it, you don't have time to do that. So I want you to prioritize teaching
Mm.
and not doing. So I had to learn to delegate, and I had to learn to be hands off and let somebody else take stuff that I wanted to do myself. You get a little nervous doing that, especially the first time, but it was good for me to do that.
Awesome. What is the worst advice that you've ever received?
I got some advice that I misinterpreted. And on hindsight, it was good advice. So the advice was from my grandfather and one of his friends. There was some tension going on at the office, some very unethical political stuff, and I was getting involved with it, like saying this isn't good. This isn't the right way to do business. I was all 20 something years old, and I thought everything has to be perfect and we can rule the world. And they kept saying, keep your powder dry, keep your powder dry, keep your powder dry, keep your powder dry. And I thought they were telling me, don't fight it. Don't get involved. This isn't your battle. And then later I looked up, keep your powder dry. And it actually means when you go to battle, have your ducks in a row.
Mm.
Don't just go to battle and wing it. When you take a stand, make sure you have all of your everything lined up. Your witnesses, if you will, your data points, if you will, your persuasive story. That's really what keep your powder meant. But I thought they were telling me to stay out of it. And I was like, how dare they tell me I need to take a stand on this? So it wound up being good advice, but at the time I thought it was really bad advice.
Awesome. Mike, what is your advice to young folks in terms of learning negotiation? What are some skills they should have or learn?
So first of all, there's a saying that I've heard from other negotiation trainers 3 times in the past month. You can't learn to swim by reading a book.
Hmm.
Don't hear something I'm not saying. There's some great books on negotiating out there. However, you read them and you go, wow, that's a really good idea. First of all, you have to dissect. And one of the reasons I call myself a B2B negotiator, there are crisis negotiators. And it's the highest form of the craft. You're negotiating over a human life. But it's different than negotiating for your salary. It's different negotiating to close a deal in sales or to buy something in purchasing.
Yes.
A person in crisis they're not experienced negotiators. So if you read a book and it says, you should slip into your late night radio DJ voice, and you're in a business meeting, someone's going to go, are you coming on to me? What is this late night radio? Like, come on. And by the way, everyone's read that book. So when you use a tactic on somebody who knows it's a tactic, you risk either making them upset because now you think they're stupid, or you risk looking foolish, which I'm not opposed to, but let's put it in context. It's a different set of techniques than business. So if you're trying to get ahead in business, look at people who've gotten ahead in business. If you're trying to get a raise and a promotion, there are people who specialize in negotiations for salary. You should follow them. Don't listen to me. I can tell you what it's like from a hiring manager position. I have advised salary negotiators on how hiring managers look at a person approaching them. There's some really good content, but don't read a book on crisis and think you're going to trick your boss into giving you a raise. It's just not going to happen. So figure out the type of negotiating that you're doing. Legal negotiations are very different than business negotiations.
Yes.
Mediation, arbitration, these are all very important, subtle differences. HR is probably closer to crisis because you've got 2 people who don't get along. So figure out the person in the vertical or people in the vertical that you're trying to accomplish something. Then I would say get comfortable practicing negotiating. Now, this can be any type of negotiation. So, for example, a lot of people just They go through life and they miss all these opportunities. And there's 7 to 10 opportunities every day to negotiate. But they're afraid to look unreasonable. They're afraid to ask. They're in a hurry. For instance, when I go out to dinner with my wife, it's at a new place. They will say, do you want the bar or the restaurant? Do you want the high top or the booth? A binary choice. And I say the same thing. I want to sit with the best server. Now, to me, this is a negotiation. There's what the average person gets, which is, can you wait for this table? And I'm going to give you one of these 2 choices. That's what the average person will accept. I don't accept that. So I say, I want the best server. And they go, huh? And I go, the server that trains all the other servers, I want that server. Because if I'm going to pay full price, and my wife has made it very clear, I'm not allowed to negotiate over the price of food. I want the best service possible. Now, here's where they miss an opportunity to negotiate back. What they could say is, sir, can you wait 10 minutes? They just got sat. And if you have a good experience, will you leave us a review on Google, on Yelp? Okay. I've asked for something that I want and need, better service. And as a negotiator, they should ask for something that helps them, a review. So I see negotiations everywhere, and I try to take these opportunities. I don't negotiate over the price of cans of soup at the store. Don't hear something I'm not saying. But there's all these many opportunities where my life can be better if I just ask, and their life could be better if they ask and I'm willing to help them. So for a young person wanting to be better at negotiating, I would say, wherever you are, you can say, well, this is what the average person gets, but I want better. There's no rule that says you can't say, this is a good deal, I'm looking for a great deal. Hey, that shirt that's 20% off, if I buy 2, can I have 40% off? And they can say no. And you say, okay, fine, I'll take the one shirt at 20% off. I'm not asking anybody rude or disrespectful.
Yep.
Be polite, be nice. We can always go to level 11 to, use an old stereotype on escalation. We can always get tough later. But why don't we start being polite and nice and saying, this is good, but I'm looking for great. What else you got? What else can you do for me? And seeing if they will. And getting comfortable being uncomfortable, to use that phrase, and in negotiations, to try to negotiate more often in our personal life than when we get in our business life. And we negotiated 3 times yesterday. And now when you're in a business negotiation, it's going to come more naturally. You're going to have more courage and confidence because you've got repetition under your belt.
That's right. That's awesome, Mike. I'm definitely going to use the server one next time I go to a restaurant.
Yep.
And I'll let you know how that goes. And lastly, Mike, where can people find you?
Oh, super easy. We Table Force, all we do is negotiation training. We own the domain negotiationtraining.com. And my contact information is there. They can link in with me, and mike@tableforce.com if they want to email me. I want to be as a purchasing guy and as a guy who has resting bee face when I relax, I don't always come across as approachable. And I want people to know I'm not scary. I am very approachable. I like people. I like to interact with people. I like meeting you. So don't buy into the hype of that mean old purchasing guy.
I can vouch for that. So Mike's been great. I greatly appreciate your insights, your experience, and like I said, your wisdom that you shared with the audience. I think you brought a lot of great perspective. I love the fact that you're actually different, because that's the way I look at myself. I don't want to be the same as anyone else. I always like to be different. I love taking risks in life. I've got burned many times, but it's, that's where you get to learn a lot too. And that's where the greatest rewards come from. So I greatly appreciate your time, Mike. And for those who are watching, and if you have any questions for Mike, you know where to find them. You can drop your comments and questions below, and I'll make sure it gets to him. Once again, thank you very much, and we'll see you in the next episode. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, Rob.